On today's episode of The Lawyer You Know, we're going to break down the HB1 bill that just recently passed in Florida, known as the anti-protesting, anti-rioting bill. So it's important to actually look at the language of the bill when we talk about what it means, what it's going to change, and how everybody's feeling about it. So the language of the bill is combating public disorder, authorizing specified elected officials to file an appeal to the Administration Commission if the governing body of a municipality makes a specified reduction to the operating budget of the municipal law enforcement agency, providing that a municipality has a duty to allow the municipal law enforcement agency to respond to a riot or unlawful assembly in a specified manner based on specified circumstances, reclassifying the penalty for an assault committed in furtherance of a riot or an aggravated riot, prohibiting cyber intimidation by publication, prohibiting a person from willfully participating in a specified violent public disturbance resulting in specified damage or injury, creating an affirmative defense to a civil action where the plaintiff participated in a riot, etc. That's the actual language. So, this bill just recently was signed into law by Governor DeSantis here in Florida. There have already been objections from politicians on the left, and there's been some support from the politicians on the right. So this is kind of a political bill in this case. There have already been legal challenges made, and there will be more made in the future. So let's talk about some of the objections made by politicians to this bill. First, we're going to hear from Senator Rouson.
I was born to protest, and my heroes have been to jail.
So he says he was born to protest, and a lot of his heroes have ended up in jail. So this is going to highlight the disagreement in this bill. Is this a bill that is anti-protest? Is this a bill that is anti-assembly? The right, including Governor DeSantis, will say no. It is anti-riot. It is anti-public disorderly conduct. It is anti-destruction of property. It is not anti-assembly, and it is not anti-protest. You heard the words. What do you think? Leave in the comments below. Is this anti-assembly? Is this anti-protest? Or do you think this is anti-violence and anti-riot? Because that's going to be a big difference when this continues to get legal challenges. Let's hear of another, which I think is the stronger argument against this bill, from Senator Victor Torres.
There are laws already that will stop you, that would incarcerate you.
So this senator says this isn't necessary. We already have laws that stop this. We already have laws that prohibit this. We have the Constitution that only protects peaceful assembly and peaceful protests. We don't need this law. And that, I think, is the strongest argument against this bill. However, there are plenty of representatives, politicians, including Governor DeSantis, that thought this bill was necessary. So let's hear some of their arguments as to why. First, let's hear from Kelli Stargel.
The deaths that occur during the protests, the fires that happen, the looting that happens.
So she mentions a lot of the destruction, a lot of the injury, a lot of the property damage that happened during these violent riots. Well, according to the senator we just heard from, these things are already illegal, so why was this bill necessary? The last person we're going to hear from is the person that's actually sponsoring the bill, which is Danny Burgess. Let's hear what he has to say about some of the confusion and objections we've heard.
In closing, the sponsor said he understood opponents' concerns, but believed the legislation wouldn't result in unintended consequences for peaceful protesters.
The only reference to peaceful protests in this bill protect it. What this bill does not protect is violence.
So he says it. That is the best argument from the right to combat this. The only mention of peaceful protests in this bill is protecting peaceful protests. That's what we want to do. We want to protect this. So, is this bill necessary? And that is any law that is kind of piling on top of another law. You need to determine, is it cumulative? Is it just repeating what other laws say? Because in that situation, we don't need it. Or is it adding to? Is it interpreting? Is it changing what that law says? And that's what most of these politicians on the right are going to say. This is a clarification. This is to give additional penalties and easier straight line arguments and appeals. If law enforcement sees some of this stuff happening, they can make arrests. This makes it easier to know what the punishment is. So people that maybe were ignorant before and go out on these protests and go out on these loots and these riots, they're going to know that it's illegal. They're going to know what their punishment is. They're going to know this stuff beforehand. So that's what the Republicans would argue is the reason for this bill. We want to stop these violent protests. We want to stop these riots. We want to stop the destruction of person and property. So this is absolutely necessary. Health and safety is one of the most important policies in our country. So that's why this bill got through. That's why this bill is passed. And Florida right now is kind of right-leaning. Obviously, DeSantis is right-leaning. So that's another reason why this bill got through. Do you think this is absolutely necessary? One of the issues I think that's going to be pointed to by a lot of Republicans and maybe some Democrats too to ask the question as to why, it seems like a lot of the Capitol rioters are being prosecuted, are being punished, are being held accountable for what they did at the Capitol that day. After the Trump rally, they storm the Capitol, they go in, they commit crimes, they're being prosecuted. Absolutely, we have seen it on the news, we've seen it in the media, we've seen it in the court documents. They are being prosecuted. What we didn't see is a lot of the BLM and some of the protests that were happening for police violence, some of the riots where we saw the videos of fires and destruction of property and people getting pushed by even some law enforcement officers in these protests and cracking their skulls, whatever's going on there, people getting injured, property getting destroyed. We haven't heard a lot about them being prosecuted. So, is this something the Republicans are trying to do to balance the playing field because a lot of the Republicans that were at the Capitol are getting prosecuted and probably the more left-leaning Democrats that were at some of the other protests aren't? Does that have something to do with it? I don't know. What do you guys think? Because I've seen a lot more prosecutions of the Capitol rioters than I have of any of the other protester rioters that were coming more from the left side. So could that have something to do with it? Are we trying to create something that makes it easier to prosecute people that are involved in these riots? Because it is true. Violent riots with property damage is already illegal. Always has been. You can't do that stuff. You could be prosecuted. You should be prosecuted criminally if you're doing this type of stuff. Peaceful protests, on the other hand, are not. And it's got to be equally applied to all protests, to all riots, if crimes are being committed. You can't prosecute some people for some crimes and not prosecute others for the same ones. So that's some of the issues that are floating around in some of this legislation that's coming down. Now, there already is other laws just like this one in other states. Some of them have been struck down as unconstitutional. Some of them have been struck down as unnecessary. A lot of this will be appealed up probably to the Supreme Court. So we'll have to keep an eye on if this bill sticks and if any other ones are following in any other states. If you guys like this type of content, please like this video and subscribe to our page so you don't miss any of the future videos on these kind of political topics.